into another episode of Third Down Universal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with Zach Malamud, and Zach, we're here after a week away, finally back at it in the grind. It is draft season now.
It is draft season. It has officially arrived, and we got a really good show today with a lot of great information to come.
Yeah, a couple drafts coming for us in our leagues, and we will help you get into your leagues. We spent some time a couple weeks ago talking about sleepers. This week, we are going to talk about some reaches here, guys that you should stay away from. Again, we're not really necessarily saying that these are bad players. It's more so where their average draft position is and where their rankings are. We're going to be going right now by ESPN rankings, but it's so that if the player is available at that spot, you probably are looking another way. That said, some of these guys, if they slip around or they slip 2 rounds, then you probably can take some of them. We'll get into it. So let's start now at quarterback. We're going to start at quarterback 542 overall. It's Lamar Jackson. Listen, Lamar Jackson, I think he's a great quarterback. I think that he has proven himself to be a good quarterback, especially in fantasy with the rushing upside. That said, I'm not sure that I put him right now as quarterback 5, and I'm probably not taking him that high.
Yeah, I agree, Brad. And he's coming off a season where injuries were, again, the problem for him, and he hasn't been able to really stay healthy. 5th of among quarterbacks, I think, is just way too high. He's finished top 9 just one time in his career. It was his 2019 MVP season that he was an absolute monster. Hasn't finished top 9 since then. And even with all the additions, there's no chance I am taking him top 5 among these quarterbacks. And I'd rather go with a guy who's proven himself last year, maybe even in the year before. Lamar Jackson has not been healthy. He's struggled since that 2019 season. I can't take him top 5 right now, even with all the weapons coming in.
Yeah, and you look at some of the guys that are right around that range, and Mark Andrews is an intriguing name there, and you probably could take one of those receivers that, there's a wave of receivers right around there, and you probably wait a round or two and get that second wave of quarterbacks, or the Fields, the Herberts, and grab one of those guys.
Yeah, and you look at just looking at Lamar in that spot, it's just difficult to see somebody taking him that high, a top 5 type quarterback. The difference between Lamar and maybe other quarterbacks you look at Patrick Mahomes, he's the top guy. Then you go to a quarterback who's maybe like quarterback 12. There's not that much of a difference. You look at other positions, you definitely can get an upgrade when it comes to wide receivers, running backs, tight ends. There's a lot of much bigger difference between the top tier quarterbacks and then the middle tier quarterbacks.
Yes. So now we jump to the next guy, quarterback 8, and he's 74 overall. And it kind of goes back to what we're saying. Listen, Deshaun Watson, good quarterback 5 years ago. I'm not sure that he's going to be that guy from 5 years ago. I think people are still chasing and they're betting on he's going to get back to being that guy. Listen, he wasn't good last year. And his supporting cast, they were okay, but I think, they're going to lean into the run game more again. And I'm not sure he's a part of that run game.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at Deshaun Watson last year, and yes, it's a very small sample size, only 6 games last season, but it's not like he was top of the tier in like fantasy points per game. That's what you really look at for a guy who hasn't played so much in that season. He wasn't even top 25 of those quarterbacks. It's difficult for me to take him top 8. That's way too high in my opinion. He's in that range around Trevor Lawrence and maybe Justin Herbert's in that range too. There's a couple guys behind him, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, and Kirk Cousins right behind him. I'd take those 3 guys any day of the week over Deshaun Watson in this season, especially because I understand he's getting used to the offense, but there's not a ton there. There's Nick Chubb, and he's going to take over the run game. Amari Cooper's the big guy at wide receiver. Elijah Moore's coming in. but none of those guys really tell you, oh, Deshaun Watson's going to be a top 8 quarterback in fantasy this season. Excuse me. I just cannot take him at 8 right now.
Yeah, and the guy ranked right after him is Trevor Lawrence. I would take Trevor Lawrence 10 times out of 10 over him, if I had the choice between them. But listen, there's that excuse that a lot of people make, which is, oh, well, he came in late in the season, and so therefore he wasn't in shape. These guys are not twiddling their thumbs for waiting for their suspension to end. I mean, D-Hop came in first game. It was like, whoa, this guy really was keeping up with his workouts the entire time when everybody was like, oh, he's just sitting around watching the games like us. No, that's not how it goes. Deshaun Watson was working out the entire time. It just didn't really work out for him last year. Listen, will he be better this year? You would assume so, but he's not a top 8 quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about better than he was last year. He finished like quarterback 32, around there. I know he only played 6 games, but I mean, jumping all the way up to top 8 is just a little bit too much.
Yeah, probably should at least take some of those guys that are ranked right after that. If you can get Trevor Lawrence, take Trevor Lawrence over him. All right, so now we're going to jump right to running back. And this is an interesting one. It's Breece Hall. Breece Hall right now is ranked running back 10, 22 overall. He's coming off the injury right now, and there's a lot of question marks. Zach, is this one of those picks where you kind of want to take a sure thing?
So this is an interesting one because I'm a big believer that Breece Hall is getting overvalued at this moment. He ranks 12th among running backs and 30 in ESPN's rankings. I mean, he is ranked way too high for a guy coming off a torn ACL right now. Just a little bit too high. He was running back 8 in his first 7 games of the season last year. The 7 games he played, he injured it in week 7, his ACL. He can get back to 18 to 20 touches per week, I think. But I don't think that's coming till maybe middle of the season. Jets have a bye week 7, maybe a little bit after that. Then he's going to be that workhorse, that number 1 guy. I just cannot feel comfortable having him as my RB1, RB2 right now, early in the season where I'm trying to get wins on the board the first 7 weeks of the season. I don't think Breece Hall is that guy. I mean, maybe you throw him in a game here or there, but you want certified and cemented options right now in the first 7 weeks of the season. I don't think Breece Hall is going to give you that. You could probably target him in trades, I think. You might want to get somebody next to him, though, as an RB2. If you can get, let's say, a top-tier running back, then somebody else right next to Breece Hall, and then when Breece Hall is rolling, then you have 3 solid running backs for the playoff stretch, the end of the season. You are set. I'd look to target that. Maybe a trade midway through the season could be a big option for Breece Hall, but no chance I'm taking him 12th among running backs right now.
Yeah, listen, I mean, Breece was good. He was 4th in receiving yards among running backs before he went down. He was top 10 at the time that he went down. And, I still believe that he will be a good running back in this league, and I think he'll have a good year. That said, I think I'm taking the sure thing at that spot especially. I think that you're going to see in draft season a lot of people are going to fall into the trap where they, just as you alluded to before, they take a wide receiver at round 1, and then all of a sudden they're picking Breece to be their number 1 running back. I think that that's a recipe for disaster. I don't know that you can rely on Breece as a running 1 consistent the whole time, especially early in the season as they start to work him back into his role off of there. Remember, they brought in Izzy Abanikanda. Sorry about that. And they also have Van Knight as well with Michael Carter. So it's a kind of full backfield. They like using the San Francisco kind of offense, and so they're rotating guys throughout. And I think that Breece's value is going to not be what it was last year because they have that amount of guys that they figured out, hey, these guys are reliable. That said, I think Breece will finish probably in running back 2 range, probably in the higher running back 2 range. That said, I wouldn't take him as a running back 1 and probably would wait to see if he slips in one of your drafts.
Yeah, and just quickly, Brett, don't fall into the trap. There was the trap last year of, it's going to be Michael Carter's backfield. Those were the reports. It's going to be Michael Carter. He's going to run the show. And everybody else was like, why isn't Breece Hall going to be the number one guy? A lot of people took Breece Hall. You're one of them, and it panned out for you. I mean, looking at Breece Hall, he's 100% going to be the number one running back in this running back room this year. I just don't know if it's going to come early in the season. He's not going to get those touches. They're going to get him back up to speed after that torn ACL.
Yeah, not to totally knock Michael Carter, but I mean, even when Breece went down, Carter had James Robinson come in and he had competition there. Then Bam Knight took carries from him and he ended up becoming a lead back. So yeah, I think that they're happy that Breece is going to be back. And, there were even rumors a couple, months ago that they might try to get a veteran guy. There's still rumors that they might go out and get Dalvin Cook and that he's in negotiations with them. Something to keep an eye on, especially as they continue to monitor what's going on with Breece Hall. But for now, I would probably stay away. There's much better options really high up in the draft. Speaking of high options up in the draft, a reach that we have is a guy who didn't really pan out to his number one potential. Right now, he's ranked running back 4, 9th overall on the ESPN cheat sheet. It's Jonathan Taylor. Zach, are you taking Jonathan Taylor in the first round if you have one of the last picks?
There's really I think there might be like a 0.2% chance that if Jonathan Taylor's there, I'm taking him. It's so unlikely. I don't know what rankers are seeing from last year, and he was running back 33 last year. It was an awful year. I agree that last year was a fluke, but I'm still worried about the mobile quarterback next to him. And most years he had a big pass heavy quarterback. He had Carson Wentz one year, Matt Ryan last year. Those guys were passing the ball, and you were like, okay, Jonathan Taylor is going to get those rushing plays, and he's going to run for a lot of yards. Last year was a struggle. And I know people are going to be like, oh, well, last year's 1 in a million. I am so worried about Jonathan Taylor this year based on Anthony Richardson's going to be taking those carries. Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz weren't taking those carries from Jonathan Taylor. Anthony Richardson's going to be doing that. I mean, I'd grab a couple of different running backs over him at number 9. There's a ton of running backs in that little stretch behind that I would definitely favor over Jonathan Taylor.
For me, JT's probably a back-end first-rounder. I understand that he struggled last year. He's still Jonathan Taylor. He combined in his first 2 seasons 33 rushing touchdowns in 2 seasons. That's pretty good. Listen, last year was a struggle. Again, a lot of offensive line problems, which we'll see if that even improves this year. And obviously, I think his one Achilles heel for this year really is going to end up being Anthony Richardson. And whether or not he can get goal line carries away from Anthony Richardson, where, the Jalen Hurts role, the coach today over from Philadelphia, and how that matches. And that's I think, going to be his biggest Achilles heel. I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be the offensive line. They made pretty good improvements there. That said, if he's on the board at the very end of the first round, I would think about it. I might pass on him and wait till the beginning of the second round to see if he's there. And if he is, I'll snap up there.
That's fair. I really I'm looking at some other options in that range, and I feel like I would rather take them. I don't know. It's weird because Jonathan Taylor was so good those 2 years. He had that 2-year stretch where he was ridiculously good and deserved to be the number 1 pick last year. I don't know if I can have that trust in a first-round pick like Jonathan Taylor, who struggled last year, especially now with a mobile quarterback coming in versus when he was first really, really good. He had those pass-heavy quarterbacks, like I mentioned.
Yeah, agree. Listen, Jonathan Taylor, again, we're not knocking him. It's more so that there are better options up top. And, you're going to see some of those guys that take Jonathan Taylor and the rest of the draft room goes, ugh. And that's kind of going to be the reaction. This year, I feel way more than any other year. It's almost like when the last couple of years up until last year, Saquon got picked, and people go, oh, because it was off of the injury and when's he going to get hurt? Last year, he kind of just proved everybody wrong, and he stayed healthy and had a really good year. I think that the Taylor reaction is going to be that this year.
Yeah, completely agree. It's going to be the same thing.
All right. So now let's jump over the other one. And another interesting case here, running back 20, 48 overall here on the cheat sheet. It's Kenneth Walker. We've spoken at length about Kenneth Walker, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. But Zach Charbonnet right now in the side for him, just based on the fact that he has really good receiving grade. And on PFF, I think that that's kind of going to be what limits the upside.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Kenneth Walker ranked that highly. I mean, he was only running back 18 last season. It wasn't like he was top 10 and he was some terrific thing. He had a great season, but he was only running back 18. So to put him now in a spot really in the top 20, I can't believe in that based on with Zach Charbonnet, like you said, Brett, coming in and being that a second round pick coming in. The Seahawks wouldn't waste a second round pick if they didn't feel that they really, really needed it. They add Charbonnet now, and it's going to be a crowded backfield. I just cannot take Kenneth Walker III in that top 20. Like I said, it just shows from Seattle taking a second round running back. It shows they don't have the most amount of belief in Kenneth Walker heading into this year.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say with Walker is from weeks 1 to 5, he had that other guy there. It was Rashad Penny, and he really didn't do that much. And then obviously Penny gets hurt, and Kenneth Walker kind of had the full workload. So unless Sharp is going down with injury, I'm not sure that Kenneth Walker is going to have that kind of load, especially in this Pete Carroll offense, where he also likes to rotate his running backs and keep everybody fresh.
Now, I will say, if Kenneth Walker, I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to be like, Kenneth Walker, I don't want to take him. If Kenneth Walker falls to you in like the 6th round, take him. Have a great time because you can do anything you possibly want with him. You could trade him. You could just plug him in as your 3rd running back. I mean, it's a great pick at the spot right there. We just wouldn't take him in the top 20. They have him going in the 4th round. I think that's just too high. Like I said, if you get him in the 6th round, I mean, you got to steal there.
Yeah, completely. All right, another guy who I have on this list, running back 18, he's ranked on this cheat sheet. 36 overall, Rachaad White. I'm not sure what everybody sees in Rachaad White that he could be a workhorse, locked-in volume back. I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. There's talk of Zeke potentially coming in. There's talk of Kareem Hunt potentially coming in. You know, out of the 45 qualified runners, White, he ranked 44th in yards after contact, 32nd in breakaway run rate, and 37th in being elusive. I mean, if you're waiting for the passing skills to come, that's probably going to take a while. Also, among 61 running backs last year with 20 targets, he was 24th in yards per route, 40th in the yak. I'm sure that the quarterback play helps him either this year. I just really don't like the pick. This is a guy I'm probably going to even just stay away from.
I agree with you that I'm going to stay away. Would I say he's overvalued right now? I don't know. Just based on he's going to be the number 1 guy in this offense that really doesn't have plenty of options. I mean, Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask is going to be the quarterback. And we've told you plenty of times on this podcast, stay away from Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. We're just not huge fans of them, especially heading into this year. I think Rachaad White, I don't know if he's overvalued. However, I would stay away from him. I look at Leonard Fournette last year. He was running back 12. And I think Tampa is probably going to lean towards Rachaad White as being that Leonard Fournette type of back, that workhorse. There's really not anybody else. I think Chase Edmonds is coming in this season. Keyshawn Vaughn was there last year. I think he comes back for another year. I think it's Rachaad White's backfield. I just would stay away. And if you can grab him a little bit later, if he falls, then perfect, jump on him. But I think this is a good range. I just won't be taking him.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I like to slip into the 3rd rounds in these kinds of redrafts. And so, one is bound to end up happening there. And, now you factor in Jalen Hurts. So there's probably 3 guys that might end up in the 3rd round or so. And so a guy like White could slip down your board a bit, but also other guys might slip down. Like I'll just take a look right here at the cheat sheet. You have Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, Dameon Pierce, Rachaad White, Chris Olave. That's how it is in their row right there. I mean, there's some pretty good options there that I would probably take over Rachaad White.
I agree with you. And I feel like if you go any of those running backs, I mean, that's a better option clearly than Rachaad White.
Yeah. Now, one of those guys that I just named who's also on this list is Dameon Pierce. He's ranked running back 17, 5th overall, so the spot right before Rachaad White. And, with Pierce, it's a little interesting. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. Devin Singletary. I think that that's another guy that's going to eat into the value. Not that Pierce is going to be bad, but again, I think he's a running back 2, even a lower running back 2 for me.
Completely agree. And I completely agree with what you said. It's based on Devin Singletary. That's the reason for this. And to put Dameon Pierce in the top 20, I've talked about Devin Singletary a couple of weeks ago. He's just that annoying running back. He's not going to do much when it comes to fantasy production, but he's going to bother Dameon Pierce owners. I could not trust Dameon Pierce in the top 20. I think there's better options on the board at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I just named that whole list. I would take all those guys over both Rachaad White and Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, clearly.
All right, so another guy who also I just named in there is Najee Harris. Najee is running back 14, 32 overall. Listen, the workload, it'll be there. I'm not totally buying the Jaylen Warren the way that it's been pushed out there. Listen, Jaylen Warren will get his carries and stuff, but I would probably rather have Ramondre Stevenson, Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs over Najee.
That's very fair. I think this year, I mean, last year he was running back 14, and then the year before that, his rookie year, he was running back 3. So right now in the spot that he is in the rankings is a good spot for him, I'd say. I definitely think that I would take some running backs. I agree with you over Najee Harris. Am I jumping to get him this year? No, but I do think in the ranking spot, he's in that area for a reason. He's going to be that workhorse back. They're figuring a lot of things out in that offense. The offensive line is getting a lot better. They have a ton of options for Kenny Pickett. The Steelers are going to be really good this year. I definitely think so, especially on offense. They're going to be a team to target for fantasy owners. But I do think Najee's in a good spot. I'm not jumping to get him right now as the 14th ranked running back.
Yeah, and it's another guy that I think a lot of people will pass on. So there is the potential that you can get him on the wrap in the next round.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, so jump to another one. And again, it's running back by committee. A.J. Dillon. He's running back 33, 96 overall. I mean, for lack of a better term, he was a bust for the first half of the year. He was a monster for the second half of the year. 6 touchdowns in the last 5 games down the stretch, splitting the carries 50-50 right down the middle. But I think this is going to lean into Aaron Jones, and they're going to lean this whole offense through Aaron Jones.
That's fair. I mean, I think A.J. Dillon in the spot that he is, it's 10th round right now. I think that's about the spot that it's a good pick maybe to take him, especially if you're maybe begging for running backs at that time. I think he's a solid option. You're going to be in backups at that point. So if he can be one of your backup running backs and sit on your bench for a little bit, if Aaron Jones goes down, I mean, A.J. Dillon has a ton of value. So that's, I think 10th round, maybe 11th round is a good spot for him. Obviously, Aaron Jones could really take a step up this year with that running back cliff coming pretty soon for him. But I think A.J. Dillon in the 10th round is probably a good spot for him, 35th ranked among running backs, like you said.
Yeah, I just think that spot in the 9th, 10th, 11th rounds, like we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, there's a ton of sleepers that pop up every year in that 9th through 11th rounds. Last year was Garrett Wilson, and that was a guy who was going in the 10th rounds in most drafts. I think that guy could be there. Listen, there's Jackson Smith-Njigba is going in the 9th round right now. Some of the quarterbacks are going in the 10th round right now. So, be wise about it. I'm not sure that I'm taking a chance on A.J. Dillon because I'm not sure how good the chance is. And I don't want to, as you said, it's running backs at that point, or it's backups at that. I'm not sure that I'm probably going to start A.J. Dillon in my lineup unless I know for sure that he's going to get the workload. Aaron Jones is banged up or something like that.
That's fair. I could definitely see some more valuable picks in that 9th, 10th, 11th round range. And AJ Dillon might not be towards the top of that list. There could be some wide receivers and running backs you could grab instead.
Yeah. And if you think back to last year, Aaron's was going, in that second round, and then it was AJ Dillon going in like the 6th or 7th round. I think this could be the year that maybe you do take both of them if you do want to go that route. AJ Dillon as the backup, just so that you have that handcuff situation. That might be the spot where, I would take him at value.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a weird one because you don't want to reach on AJ Dillon because AJ Dillon's going to be the backup. You know he's going to be the backup, and maybe he bursts out, but you saw at the start of last year that he really struggled. Be careful in that situation. Don't reach way too far for AJ Dillon when you can have another valuable piece instead.
Exactly. Totally agree with that one. We go to another one and we go all the way up the board. It's a guy that you've talked about a lot on this from a dynasty perspective. We talk a little bit from a redraft perspective. Running back 6, 11 overall, Derrick Henry. He finished in the top 5 in running backs and second in carries, third in rushing. But is he, waiting? Is the cliff going to come? Is he going to stay on the field the whole season? What do you think?
So this is one of the ones, and I'm not predicting like, oh, he's going to get hurt. I have no clue. What I am worried about is that the injuries will come soon. They will happen at some point. This guy had one injury a couple of years ago where it took him out for the rest of the season. Obviously, he was healthy last year, but I don't think he had like a full workload last year. They had a lot of receiving backs there as well. I think this year is Derrick Henry by himself and just going to town in that Tennessee backfield. I think they're going to rely on him very heavily, both in the run game, and we saw last year, they get him involved in the pass game as well. He can be a big target out of the backfield. I'm not saying that he's going to get injured, like I said, but I'm worried about the injuries. And you should too, if you're thinking about taking him in the top 11, in the top 12 of your draft. You should be worried about taking Derrick Henry because the injuries and the cliff is going to start to come soon.
Yeah, to me, he's still a second rounder. And if I'm taking him, I'm taking Tyjae Spears as well as that handcuff, just because you don't know of what's going to happen. And so if you're taking a pick that high, I like to have a reliable, what you're getting. You don't really know what you're getting with Derrick Henry this year because you're not sure what the health outlook is for him. Obviously, if he's completely healthy, he's Derrick Henry. He's really good. Career high in targets, receptions, and so he's started to do the receiving work too. That said, bring in Tyjae Spears, who is really good at receiving. I think that's going to eat in a little bit. That said, I don't know that Derrick Henry is going to make it through this full season. I don't want to make any predictions or whatnot, but at some point, he banged up, and so I can't use a first round pick on that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of healthy wide receivers and running backs that have played 16, 17 games every single year of their career. We're watching it before our eyes. So I'd feel more comfortable with a consistent guy, maybe even a guy like Nick Chubb, who never misses a game. I'd feel more comfortable taking him than Derrick Henry at that spot in the second round.
Completely. All right, so our last running back here, it's Miles Sanders. Right now, he's ranked in the top 20 at running back 19, 47 overall. I'm not sure that Miles Sanders on my do not ever draft ever again list after he scored 0 touchdowns in 2021. He scored 13 last year. He ranked inside the top 5 in running backs in touchdowns inside the 10-yard line. That said, I'm not sure how much I'm buying the whole offensive line thing in Carolina. It might be a little bit of a struggle there.
Yeah, and there's just too many question marks for me. I can't really sit there and be like, oh, I'm going to take Miles Sanders in the top 20 because, Carolina's offense is going to be good and Bryce Young is there and they got a new offense and everything. There's so many question marks. Will he be healthy? Will Bryce Young take some of his carries? Will this offense be pass heavy or run heavy? We have no clue right now. So I can't trust taking Miles Sanders in the top 20 of running backs. There's some other options right around there that you can definitely take over Miles Sanders. I'd stay away in drafts. I would think about him maybe as a possible trade target midway through the season. If he's rolling and you can maybe get a solid running back and he's proving himself that he's going to be solid for your team, then I would go after him so he could be a possible trade target. But I definitely stay away from him in drafts, especially if he's going in the top 20 of running backs.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the running backs that we have here. I mean, right after that's Kenneth Walker. We just spoke about him. But then it's a lot of wide receivers that are all stacked in a row. I mean, D-Hop and Mike Evans. We don't like Mike Evans. DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley. Those are all guys that I think would be a better pick than take the running back at that spot.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something we're going to talk about once we get closer to actual redrafts, like strategies going in per round, maybe figuring some of those things out. We'll talk about that in, I think, under a month. One of our next couple of shows will get into that. But Miles Sanders, you would definitely take those wide receivers, like you said, Brett, over Miles Sanders, especially in that spot midway through.
Yeah, I totally agree with the trade target potential. There is that potential that he's a low running back too and has the potential to reach for that higher end, especially down the stretch as this team kind of gets used to each other. But for now, I'm staying away. I'm taking one of those targets. Yeah,
that's completely fair.
All right, so now another guy, and this one is kind of mind-boggling to me. Running wide receiver 3 as we get into the wide receivers. Wide receiver 3, 5th overall right now, but he's going even higher in a lot of drafts. It's Ja'Marr Chase. Listen, I'm not sure that Ja'Marr Chase could go over Tyreek Hill. I would prefer Tyreek Hill. We spoke about him, last week or 2 weeks ago on our sleepers, and I don't understand the buying the dip just based on the fact that he's got T. Higgins there, and I don't know.
This one is such a weird one because he's such a talented player and we're not knocking him. He's going to be great this season, but to take him in the top 3, the top 5, I mean, that's just way too much for me. I would, there's so many other options there that I'd rather take. He's 3rd amongst wide receivers. I think he could be probably 4th in that spot. There's a question of, would you take Travis Kelce over him? I would take the 3 running backs, Eckler, McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson. I'd take all of them over Ja'Marr Chase right now. And I understand the production that he's had the last couple of years. He finished 5th in his rookie year and 11th last year. 11th last year was also with a couple of injuries in the way, and he missed 4 games during the regular season. So that's a question mark of could he have been even higher last year if those injuries didn't happen. But with how many options there are in that Cincinnati offense, like we mentioned with T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon still there at running back, I just would take players over Ja'Marr Chase, who I know are going to be the certified number 1 target. They're going to get all the points in the red zone and figure things out, like guys like Travis Kelce, Bijan Robinson, Tyreek Hill. Those are going to be the number 1 guys, and you're not going to have to worry about really anybody else taking those points away from them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you go even higher than that. You got Kupp and you got Jefferson. Like, those guys are getting all the targets, all the touchdowns. And so I'm not sure that Chase gets that. And for me, there's too many really good running backs up there at the top of the draft that I would take over Ja'Marr Chase.
Yeah, we're not, like I said, we're not knocking them, but I think 5 in a redraft is just a little bit too high for me.
I totally agree with that, especially just, listen, he had a dry spell in the middle of last year, and then he got banged up a couple games after that. And so if you're taking a top 5 pick, you don't want that in any week. You want a full, consistent season for, your player, your number 1 pick to take you to the promised land.
Exactly.
All right, so another one, and we've spoken of this guy also at length, so we won't spend too much time about it. It's Deebo Samuel. Right now, he is ranked 39th overall, wide receiver 17. The usage, it wasn't what it was. 28, wide receiver 28 last year. He had a 25.4% target share, which was 19th. but he had 5 deep targets the entire year, 108th. They're not going to use him as a rusher, obviously, because they're going to lean into Christian McCaffrey. And we spoke about, this is a sell candidate for a dynasty perspective. I'm probably a guy who would use him in the flex, and I'm not sure that you get that flexible where he's going in redraft.
Yeah, I'm staying away this year. I just completely. Everybody holds on to that career year that he had in 2021, and now he's a big name as well. So people hold on to that. He was wide receiver 10 before McCaffrey showed up last year, and after McCaffrey showed up, he was wide receiver 59. I mean, with McCaffrey there, he's not going to get those rushing. Those rushes, like you mentioned, Brett. And in the past game, he's not too much involved. So it's a really big stretch to take him 17th among wide receivers. I'd just stay away while I can. There's no reason he should be with those numbers with McCaffrey, before McCaffrey and after McCaffrey. There's no reason he should be taken in the top 20 and getting picked in the top 40 of drafts this year.
Now, I'm not going to name names, but I can think of a couple of people in our league that will take him just based on his name value. And take him that high, I don't know. Again, I would use it in a flex role. It might be a guy that I'll keep my eye on later on in the season. Maybe you trade for him if you want to get him in the flex role, but you won't be able to draft him as a flex.
Yeah, it's just way too early. And maybe he's another guy. If he drops, then maybe you jump on him. But you cannot take him in the top 40.
Yeah, completely. All right, so another guy who's getting a lot of hype right now, but he hasn't been getting a lot of playing time because he can't get on the field. Michael Thomas. He's wide receiver 36, 81 overall. It's tough to say what he's even be with injury history.
This has been the guy that just stay away for the last 2 years. Don't even think about him. I don't care if he's there. Just stay away. Let somebody else take him. That's what he's been in my mind. I mean, he ranks 36 and 81 in the rankings. It's just he played just 3 games last year and has way too much injury history. Like you mentioned, Brett, to be drafted even close to 9th round right now. Like, he's a late round flyer, and you pray that he doesn't get injured. That's where he is right now. I would not even think about it. Especially going in the 9th round. That's way too early, and there's way too many sleepers that we've brought up, Brett, that you can definitely take over Michael Thomas, who is a big, massive question mark right now.
Yeah, and, not to dump too much on Thomas, but again, he can't get on the field, and so, yeah, let someone else take him. As far as that whole offense goes, though, Olave only had 4 touchdowns last year. I think that figure is obviously going to improve. And so, to me, he could be a potential number 1 receiver just from a fantasy perspective, especially if Michael Thomas goes down again, which, we'll see what happens and whether he could stay healthy. But I think this is a career that has been just ridden with injury. And it's unfortunate for Michael Thomas because he's a talented player, but, let somebody else take him this year.
Yeah, and those people who think that Derek Carr is coming in, so Michael Thomas is going to be one of his top options. He's going to be great. Chris Olave was a beast last year. He's going to be the number 1 target. It's not even close in New Orleans. I understand the hype that, Michael Thomas is bigger and he's going to be a red zone target. If he can't stay on the field, then please do not draft him.
Name value. I think that's what it comes down to. It's name value.
Yep.
All right, so now let's jump to another one. Another guy who kind of has some name value here, wide receiver 32, 68 overall. It's Michael Pittman Jr. Listen, Colts, they were 8th in the NFL in pass attempts for the entire season. Top 10 in usage for Michael Pittman among wide receivers. And yet he finished outside the top 20 fantasy points per game. He was 17th in target share. He didn't finish in the top 20. I don't know. For me, I'm not sure how much they're going to really throw. And just based on the fact that they have Jonathan Taylor, they have Anthony Richardson, I think that Pittman will get work, but I'm not sure that he's worth that pick.
Yeah, I like Michael Pittman. I've liked Michael Pittman the last couple of years, and the reason for that has been his quarterbacks those years. And yes, I didn't love Carson Wentz, but he threw the ball a lot. And Michael Pittman was the number one target. He was the guy to look for, and he was going to be Wentz's favorite target one way or another in that offense. Last year, Matt Ryan comes in, and he wasn't healthy for a fair amount of time. However, in the time that he was on the field, Michael Pittman was the number one guy. He was the number one target, and he put up points. And he only finished, like you said, Brett, he finished outside the top 20. He was wide receiver 21 last year, but that was due to inconsistent quarterback play. And now you look at this year, he's got Anthony Richardson. What is Anthony Richardson's weakness? Throwing the ball, quarterback play, passing ability. I mean, there's no belief right now in Michael Pittman Jr. I just cannot take him earlier than maybe late 7th, early 8th. That's a probably the fair spot for him. But even in that case, I'd probably stay away because I feel like there's better options on the board.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a ton of good options, especially if I start to flip, because as I spoke about before, listen, that second wave of quarterbacks kind of hits around that 6th round. And so guys slip. Well, because one team grabs a quarterback, and now, okay, well, 4 of the teams have a quarterback. I need to get one. And you see that every year in drafts where teams are almost chasing positions because they don't want to be left out, being the guy without the quarterback. And so, you might get a couple guys that slip at that spot. And so I'm not sure that I would take Pittman over them.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, so another guy that we have here, and it's a rookie. Listen, he's going to be good. He's going to have a good career. It's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Right now, he is ranked 87th overall, 41 in wide receivers. And I'm honestly just really staying away from him because he's a number 3 receiver right now. And, there's question marks of whether he can be the 2 and all that. But right now, at this very moment, he is the number 3 receiver, and that scares the crap out of me.
I completely, yeah. He is now in an offense where he should 100% be the first rookie wide receiver off the board in Dynasty. I don't know if he should be in redraft. He shouldn't be the first. I think Jordan Addison has a good argument. I mean, you look at other guys like Zay Flowers, who could go ahead of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett worked very well with Geno Smith last year. And I mean, we shouldn't expect consistent fantasy production for Smith-Njigba this season unless one of those 2 guys goes down or it's towards the later stages of the season and Lockett is kind of taking a dip and then Smith-Njigba jumps up. But to take him early right now and 9th round or 8th round, he shouldn't be the first rookie wide off the board, like I said. And the only reason you're taking him really this year is you believe that he's going to end up taking over Tyler Lockett early in the season and be that number 2 wide receiver, because right now he is the number 3, no doubt about it, in this offense, especially with Geno at quarterback.
Yeah, just from some of our sleepers. I mean, Samaje Perine's right in that range. Jordan Addison, as you just alluded to, is right in that range. And then, you have some other guys like who do we even have? Let's pick a good one here. We have, Javonte. We spoke a lot about Javonte and how he's right in that range. That's a good one. I know that I would take him over, take JSN over him. And then Addison is at number 100. He's literally 13 spots behind him, and I would rather have Addison at that spot than JSN. So I might even reach on Addison at that spot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And yes, the talent is there. We're not saying he's going to be really good, and he's going to be a really good pro. I don't know if it's going to be in his rookie year that he's going to be a beast. And I think there's other options. Jordan Addison's going to be the number 2, most likely in Minnesota, where Kirk Cousins loves throwing the ball. Geno Smith, on the other hand, loves passing, and they're also in a run-heavy offense with 2 strong running backs. So he's not going to get as much opportunity as people think in this offense. And Jordan Addison definitely would be a stronger option as the first rookie wide off the board rather than Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, and I figured out the guy that I was looking for, Jamal Williams, and he's ranked 1-4 right now. And so, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, he's the sleeper. And so, to take JSN over him, like, again, might be a guy that you reach on a round or two, especially with the Kamara. We'll see what happens. But Kamara basically pleading no contest. And so we'll find out what the implications from the NFL perspective are on that. But it seems like Kamara is just basically subject to community service and whatnot. But we'll find out obviously quickly as the NFL training camps start to open in the next week, what the implications are as far as potential suspension and things like that. Jamal Williams, though, they're at 105. I mean, I would take him over JSN.
Any day of the week.
All right, so now we jump to our final wide receiver. It's Calvin Ridley. Listen, we spoke a lot about Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk as well. I think that this is probably a good potential pick. But that said, to pick him at 55 right now might be a little high just based on the fact that Christian Kirk is right, a couple rounds later, and you probably can cash in on that one.
Yeah, completely. And you're a big fan of Calvin Ridley heading into this season. I think Christian Kirk is going to have another really good year. I think you can switch off between which one you like better. I think it's going to be very close, and I think they're both going to have really good fantasy seasons because they are going to be the number 1 and number 2 guys. It's probably going to be 1A and 1B as in the wide receiver room in that offense. But 55, like you mentioned, is just a little bit too high. 6th round. I would feel more comfortable if he was maybe back end of flex picks, maybe first guy on your bench, or you're chilling. You're really feeling good if you have Calvin Ridley as your 3rd wide receiver heading into the season. That's a good spot for him. There's going to be people that are going to reach on him. Definitely. They're going to reach because he's the name and he was a beast when he was with Atlanta. Of course, this is the suspension, and they think he's going to come in right away and be that number 1 guy. I think it's going to be 1A and 1B, and I'd sit back, let those other teams pick Calvin Ridley higher. And if he falls into your lap in maybe the 7th round, perfect pick for you.
Listen, and I like Calvin Ridley, but I to go against the argument, you look at guys like Le'Veon Bell, you look at guys like Deshaun Watson, guys who took a year off and then came back, and they were not the same player. So it's very possible that Calvin Ridley does pick up where he left off after he didn't take a full season. But at the same time, if you're going to spend a 6th round pick, you need him to be the 2021 Calvin Ridley if you're going to cash in on that return on investment. Otherwise, I don't know that the value makes sense, especially up that high in the draft.
Yeah, and we talk about it, Brett, always. The 1st round pick doesn't win your draft. The 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, those guys win you your league and win you the championship. So not wasting, but getting or passing up on options like other players in that area to take a guy like Calvin Ridley that's still a really big question mark would be a huge mistake, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. And now we jump into our final player, and it's tight end Darren Waller. And the hype is real about Darren Waller. They add him into a New York Giants offense where he probably will be one of the focal points of the entire offense, especially depending on what happens with the Saquon Barkley situation. But at the same time, Waller missed 14 games over the last 2 years. He had the knee injury, he had the hamstring injury. I'm not sure that he's the top 5 tight end that we all think that he could be just because he was.
All right, Brett, I'm going to rant for a little bit so you can sit back, maybe like 2-3 minutes. Here we go. You ready? All right. I understand the hype in this offense. There's not a ton of consistent targets like we mentioned. Saquon Barkley still a question mark if they're going to get that deal done and he's going to be the starting running back this year. I get it. He's missed 14 games in the last 2 seasons. That means he's only played 20. And in those times, he was not even close to the top 20 in tight ends. It was really 2 bad seasons. There's no chance now that someone can tell me that the New York Giants, who have had one top 10 fantasy tight end in the last decade, are magically going to have a top 4 tight end, and he's going to be taken over George Kittle. That is absolutely ridiculous in my mind. There's no chance in a million years that George Kittle should be going behind Darren Waller, especially with the injuries. Especially with the questions in this offense. I would put him probably next to Kyle Pitts right now in the 8th round, and you take your pick on who you want, Darren Waller or Kyle Pitts. And I could give you a fair enough argument that Kyle Pitts is going to be that guy that you would choose. How about this, Brett? I mean, a lot of people have like season bets and all this stuff. I guarantee, Brett, that Pat Freiermuth, who's ranked, I think, 8th or 9th right now among tight ends, he's in a more crowded Pittsburgh Steelers offense. He will put up more fantasy points than Darren Waller this year.
He's 88 and tight end 8. I actually agree with you on that. I think that's probably the spot that I probably would have put Waller. Listen, again, everybody's at Waller, and they're thinking, oh, he's going to be Travis Kelce. He's going to be Mark Andrews. He's going to get all the targets, and every single play will be made by him. This is not a Giants offense that doesn't have any receivers like they're all making it out to be. Wan'Dale Robinson was really good. They bring Jalen Hyatt. Paris Campbell comes in. Sterling Shepard, if he can stay healthy, he's a good receiver. They have options. And of course, they went out and they signed Jamison Crowder, who's reliable over the middle. So I think that the Giants right now might actually spread the ball way more than what everybody's saying that they're going to do. Listen, they have Saquon, and Saquon's great. And they all have Matt Breida, who's another option that could be used as one of those checkdowns. I'm not sure that every single checkdown is going to go to Darren Waller. Is he a good tight end? Yes. Will he be a top 10 tight end? Maybe. I don't know that he's going to be a top 5 tight end. And for that reason, I 100% agree with you. I wouldn't take Waller at that spot.
Yeah, like we said, I understand that it's different coaching staffs and the coaching carousel really changes. But the New York Giants have had, like I said, one top 10 fantasy tight end in the last decade. It was Evan Ingram really early in his career, not coming off a ton of injuries like Darren Waller is, and not coming into a new offense. He had a year before that, Evan Ingram, and then he worked into the offense and was I think he was top 7 in that 1 year where he went off as the Giants tight end. There's no chance that somebody's telling me that Darren Waller is going to be a top 4 tight end and finish higher than George Kittle and Pat Freiermuth. He is right in that range with Kyle Pitts, and that's all I have to say about it.
Listen, we spoke about our sleepers last week, and there's 2 guys that are right behind him. Dobbins, and then it's David Montgomery. I think that those 2 options I would take over. Jerry Jeudy's lurking right over there as well, just above him, and there's the chance he slips based on that people aren't really buying the hype on him. I don't know. I agree, though, that I wouldn't take Waller at that spot at 58. I would wait. Listen, if he drops, then sure, but I don't know he's going to drop because I think that, a guy like that has name value, and we just spoke a couple of guys previously about drafting on name. I think that's a guy that's going to go right around then, and there'll be some Giants fans that even reach on him because they're buying the hype right now.
Exactly. I was going to say, we have Giant fans in our league. We'll let them take Darren Waller early if they want to. We'll go take one of our sleepers and call it a day. But remember it, Pat Freiermuth, more fantasy points than Darren Waller this year.
Totally. I think that, to cap it off, there are, as we've learned today and described, there are so many options in fantasy. We're going to kind of give a little bit of a cheat sheet next week. And some of those guys that you might want to circle and some of our bolder predictions, some of those guys you want to really target in your drafts. We'll circle some of those. And until then, I mean, Dak, this has been a really good one. I think that we raised a lot of names over the last couple of weeks. of guys that are sleepers, a couple rounds later that you can grab, and then some of the guys that you kind of should stay away from.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of guys to watch out for and keep an eye on and maybe stay away from. Very important heading into redraft season because there's a ton of hype that comes out about every single one of these guys. We don't want you to really fall into that trap.
Yeah, next week we're going to come up with I'm going to come up with it on the spot right now. We're going to come up with 3 players for each position that you should target, and it just spread out throughout the draft. And that's what we will do next week. Until then, have a good weekend, everyone. Brett Malamud signing off with Zach Malamud. It's the 3rd round reversal fantasy football podcast. We will see you all next week.